Silence feels dangerous to most men not because it lacks meaning, but because it removes control. Words give structure to uncertainty. Even when that structure is artificial, it provides relief. Speaking creates the sensation of movement, progress, and agency. Silence removes all three. It forces a man to sit inside unresolved emotional space without tools. For someone whose internal stability depends on alignment, feedback, or reassurance, this feels intolerable. Silence becomes interpreted as risk. Conflict, by contrast, still offers engagement. There is reaction, resistance, and information. Silence offers none. It exposes the man to ambiguity without a buffer, and ambiguity reveals orientation immediately. If his internal state is externally regulated, silence destabilizes him. If his stability is internal, silence feels neutral. Emotional systems respond to this difference instantly. Most men speak in moments of tension because silence feels like irresponsibility. They believe that saying something, anything, is better than allowing space. They explain, clarify, soften, or reassure in order to restore equilibrium. What they do not see is that premature speech rarely restores balance. It interrupts emotional processing before it has completed its cycle. Words freeze a moving state and treat it as truth. This is why so many conversations feel exhausting rather than clarifying. Emotion is still in motion, but it is being forced into narrative. Silence allows emotion to move without being shaped. It removes interference. Like a physical system left undisturbed, emotional systems organize themselves when manipulation stops. Silence also reveals the man's relationship to outcome. A man who needs alignment to feel stable experiences silence as loss. He fills it to avoid discomfort. A man who is internally oriented experiences silence as information. He observes rather than reacts. This distinction determines whether silence escalates or de-escalates tension. When a man speaks quickly, he signals that uncertainty unsettles him. When he remains silent without tension, he signals capacity. Capacity is not passivity. It is tolerance. It communicates that misalignment does not threaten identity or direction. This is felt immediately by the woman, often more strongly than any verbal reassurance. Talking too soon often corrupts emotional information. When emotion has not stabilized, language distorts rather than clarifies. Each explanation narrows interpretation prematurely. The woman feels guided, pressured, or subtly corrected before she herself understands what she feels. Conversation becomes invasive rather than connective. Silence gives emotional information time to mature. It separates signal from noise. Most confusion in relationships does not come from lack of communication, but from excessive narration during emotional motion. Silence allows clarity to emerge rather than be negotiated. Men often believe silence creates distance. In reality, premature speech does. Words used to manage emotion collapse polarity by forcing convergence. Silence preserves difference. Difference is not disconnection, it is orientation. When a man allows silence, he allows distance to exist without threat. This creates space for polarity to breathe. Attraction responds to this space because it feels intentional rather than avoidant. Silence communicates that closeness does not require constant synchronization. It allows the relationship to remain dynamic rather than fused. This does not mean silence is always correct. Silence backed by fear is withdrawal. Silence backed by resentment is punishment. Silence backed by anxiety is pressure. These forms of silence escalate tension. Grounded silence is different. It is presence without interference. The man is emotionally available, but not directive. He is not withholding. He is allowing. The emotional signal is calm. When silence is grounded, emotional escalation loses fuel. There is nothing to push against. Feelings rise, peak, and settle without consequence. The relationship stabilizes not because silence fixes anything directly, but because it stops amplifying what does not need amplification. At this stage, silence stops being a tactic and becomes a posture. The man no longer uses words to protect himself from discomfort. he allows discomfort to pass. This changes the entire dynamic. Emotional expression becomes cleaner, less performative, less charged. Silence becomes the container in which clarity forms naturally. Silence forces truth because it removes negotiation. Words are often used to soften reality, delay resolution, or shape perception. They become bargaining tools. Silence refuses to bargain. It allows reality to present itself without modification. This is why silence feels risky. It removes the ability to manage outcome through explanation. Many relationships remain ambiguous, not because truth is hidden, but because it is constantly postponed through dialogue. Silence accelerates inevitability. Alignment or divergence surfaces naturally when nothing interferes. For men, this is uncomfortable because it removes agency. Talking creates the illusion of control. Silence exposes actual structure. When a man remains silent without fear, he allows the relationship to reveal what it already is. Some connections strengthen under this clarity. Others dissolve. Both outcomes are correct. Silence does not preserve relationships. It reveals them. This is its greatest value. It saves time, energy, and emotional labor that would otherwise be spent maintaining illusions through conversation. Silence also retrains emotional systems. When emotions are constantly validated, explained, or responded to, they learn to perform. Expression escalates to produce reaction. Silence removes the incentive to escalate. Feelings no longer need to intensify to be acknowledged. Over time, emotional expression becomes quieter, more honest, and more precise. The relationship feels lighter, not because emotions disappear, but because they are no longer driving the system. The man's internal orientation is critical here. If he uses silence to provoke response, it fails. If he uses silence to avoid discomfort, it fails. Silence works only when the man is willing to accept whatever truth emerges. This requires detachment from outcome, not indifference, but non-dependence. He must allow clarity, even if it is inconvenient. This posture communicates integrity. The woman experiences this as safety at a deeper level than reassurance ever provides. She feels that truth is allowed to exist without management. Over time, silence restores meaning to words. When words are no longer compensatory, they regain weight. Communication becomes intentional rather than reactive. The man speaks from position rather than anxiety. When he does speak, it lands. The relationship stops revolving around processing and starts revolving around reality. This reduces confusion dramatically. Clarity no longer needs to be extracted through effort. It emerges because nothing is preventing it. Silence also restores polarity by preserving direction. The man no longer collapses difference through over-communication. He allows contrast to exist. Attraction responds to this because it signals independence of regulation. The man is not using the relationship to stabilize himself. He is sharing space, not seeking containment. This distinction changes everything. At the deepest level, silence teaches the man to trust himself. He no longer needs words to prove, reassure, or defend. He allows truth to arrive without protection. This ends emotional bargaining. The relationship either aligns with reality or reveals its limits. In both cases, the man remains intact. Silence becomes not an absence of communication, but the foundation of honest connection. When a man understands this, he stops fearing quiet moments. He recognizes them as the space where clarity is born. Emotional control is often praised as one of the core markers of masculine strength, yet it is consistently misunderstood at a structural level. Many men are taught, implicitly or explicitly, that strength means remaining unaffected, unreactive, and emotionally contained regardless of internal experience. Over time, this idea solidifies into a rigid rule. If you do not show emotion, you are in control. If you remain calm on the surface, you are strong. This belief appears functional, especially in high-pressure environments. But in relationships, it produces the opposite of what men intend. Suppression is mistaken for regulation. Silence is mistaken for stability. Distance is mistaken for composure. None of these are the same thing. Suppression does not remove emotion. It delays it. Emotion that is not integrated remains active within the nervous system, shaping perception, tone, posture, timing, and decision-making. The man may believe he is neutral, but emotional systems do not respond to belief. They respond to congruence. What he experiences internally as control is often felt externally as tension. Something is being held back. Something is compressed. The absence of visible reaction does not communicate stability. It communicates restraint under pressure. This is why so many men feel confused when their attempts to appear calm result in distance rather than respect. They believe they are demonstrating strength, while the emotional system reads internal strain. True emotional control is not the elimination of emotion. It is the regulation of orientation. A man with real control does not need to manage every feeling as it arises, nor does he need to express it in order to relieve discomfort. He allows emotion to exist without granting it authority over identity, behavior, or direction. This distinction is foundational. Suppression pushes emotion below awareness, where it continues influencing behavior unconsciously. Regulation keeps emotion within awareness without allowing it to dictate action. One state is brittle, the other is resilient. Most men confuse the two because suppression requires effort, and effort is often misinterpreted as strength. This misunderstanding gradually leads men into rigidity. They narrow their emotional range, reduce responsiveness, and limit expression, believing firmness signals dominance. In reality, rigidity is fragile. It functions only while pressure remains within a narrow band. Once pressure increases, rigidity cracks. Emotional systems respond far more positively to elasticity than to stiffness. A man who can feel without reacting communicates resilience. A man who cannot feel without suppressing communicates fragility. Attempts to appear unbothered often backfire because incongruence is detected immediately. The woman senses that something is happening internally that is not being acknowledged. The dissonance becomes more important than the behavior itself. Another distortion appears when men equate emotional control with emotional distance. They disengage internally while remaining physically present. They stop feeling instead of learning how to feel without collapsing. This creates emotional absence, not strength. Control without presence feels cold. Presence without control feels chaotic. Strength exists at the intersection of both. A man who understands this remains engaged while staying internally anchored. He does not outsource regulation to the relationship, nor does he isolate himself from experience. He stays available without becoming reactive. Attraction responds to this balance. It is not impressed by emotional silence, nor is it sustained by dramatic expression. It responds to composure that does not require suppression. When a man tolerates his internal state without acting it out or hiding from it, he communicates self-trust. Self-trust is read as safety. Safety, when paired with direction, sustains attraction over time. Emotional control in its mature form is quiet. It does not announce itself. It is felt through consistency. Problems arise when men begin using emotional control defensively. Instead of regulating themselves, they attempt to neutralize situations that might provoke feeling. They avoid difficult conversations, soften boundaries, over-explain, or preemptively accommodate in order to preserve calm. This behavior often looks composed, but structurally, it is reactive. The man is not in control of himself. He is controlling the environment to avoid testing his internal stability. Emotional systems read this immediately. Calm achieved through avoidance does not communicate strength. It communicates fragility protected by management. Over time, bypassed emotion accumulates. Tolerance narrows. The man becomes less patient, more irritable, or emotionally distant without understanding why. Small disruptions begin to feel threatening. He believes he is maintaining control, yet his capacity is shrinking. True emotional control expands tolerance. False control shrinks it. This difference becomes visible not in moments of calm, but under sustained pressure. When pressure persists, suppression collapses. Regulation holds. Another common confusion emerges when men mistake emotional control for emotional superiority. They position themselves above emotion rather than within it. They intellectualize feelings, explain them away, or dismiss them as irrational in order to maintain composure. While cognition can support regulation, it cannot replace integration. Emotion processed only through logic remains unresolved in the body. The words sound calm, but the internal charge remains. Emotional systems trust coherence over explanation. When logic is used to suppress rather than integrate, it becomes another form of avoidance. Real emotional control requires contact with emotion, not distance from it. The man must feel what arises without identifying with it or acting it out. This requires capacity, not technique. Capacity is built through repeated exposure to discomfort, without collapse or suppression. Each time a man allows emotion to pass without managing outcome, his tolerance expands. Over time, what once felt overwhelming becomes neutral. Control emerges naturally because there is nothing left to control. Emotion no longer threatens orientation. This is why emotional control cannot be faked. It is not a performance. It is not a stance. It is a byproduct of internal alignment. When alignment exists, reaction loses urgency. The man does not need to demonstrate restraint. He does not need to appear indifferent. He remains responsive without being reactive. His presence becomes stable because it is not defended. In relationships, this form of control changes everything. The man no longer adjusts himself to maintain peace. He allows tension without escalation. He allows emotion without absorption. He does not rush to resolve what does not require resolution. This removes pressure from the dynamic. The woman feels free to move emotionally without destabilizing the system. Emotional expression becomes cleaner because it no longer needs to test boundaries. The relationship gains elasticity. Importantly, this does not mean the man becomes passive. He still sets boundaries. He still takes action. He still makes decisions. The difference is that these actions are not driven by emotional urgency. They are driven by orientation. When he speaks, it is from position rather than reaction. When he is silent, it is from presence rather than avoidance. Emotional control at this level is indistinguishable from self-trust. Most men never reach this level because they are taught techniques instead of capacity. They learn how to appear controlled, not how to become stable. They manage symptoms rather than structure. As a result, their control collapses under sustained pressure. True control does not collapse because it is not enforced. It is embodied. This is the final distinction. Emotional control is not resisting emotion. It is no longer being threatened by it. When a man reaches this point, strength stops being something he performs. It becomes something the system recognizes without explanation.